The diner went silent the moment he leaned in. "You're in danger. Pretend I'm your dad." Before she could breathe, two men in gray suits closed in, their hands already reaching inside their jackets. But when the waitress played along, the Mafia boss whispered one more thing that blew her entire life open. What was coming for her next still had no name. If you're hooked in and want to enjoy this story, go ahead and subscribe, and drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. It's always amazing to see where everyone's watching. Plus, tomorrow I've got another incredible story lined up, and you definitely don't want to miss it. Alright, back to the story. Catherine Alvarez had never believed in fate. Not when her mother dragged her from Philadelphia to Baltimore at age 7. Not when they moved again 2 years later to a different apartment across town. And certainly not when she turned down a full scholarship to stay close to home, watching her dreams shrink to fit inside her mother's fears. But sitting across from a tattooed stranger, while two predators circled closer, Catherine wondered if maybe her entire life had been rushing toward this single, terrifying moment. "Play along," Russell murmured, his lips barely moving. His hand remained on her shoulder, heavy and warm. "Smile. Look annoyed with me, like daughters do." Catherine's breath came in shallow gasps. The two men in gray suits had stopped at the counter, close enough that she could hear the leather of their shoes creaking. One of them ordered coffee. The other never took his eyes off her booth. I don't understand." "You don't need to understand. You need to act." Russell's voice dropped even lower, urgent. "They're watching. Right now. They're deciding if I'm actually your father or if I'm lying. Give them a reason to believe me." Catherine's mind raced. Every instinct screamed to run, to call for help, to do something other than sit here pretending this nightmare made sense. But the cold certainty in Russell's eyes, the way his body had positioned itself between her and the entrance, something told her he wasn't the threat here. The men were. She took a shaky breath and rolled her eyes with exaggerated teenage exasperation. "Dad, I already told you. Mom doesn't want a party. She hates surprises." Russell's expression shifted, something almost like approval flickering across his weathered face. "Well, she's getting one anyway. 25 years of marriage deserves a celebration." The performance felt surreal, each word sticking in Catherine's throat, but she forced herself to lean back in the booth, crossing her arms like she'd done this 1,000 times, like she knew this man, like the tattoos crawling up his neck and the dangerous air around him were somehow familiar. From the corner of her eye, she watched the gray-suited men. The one at the counter accepted his coffee but didn't drink it. The other pulled out his phone, typed something, then showed the screen to his partner. Catherine's stomach clenched. Were they texting about her? Confirming something? "Good girl," Russell said softly. Then louder, "I'll talk to your mother myself. You just focus on your shift." He stood, fishing a wallet from his jacket. The movement revealed something else, a gun, holstered beneath his arm. Catherine's eyes widened. Russell placed a $50 bill on the table, far too much for the coffee he hadn't ordered. His hand moved to her cheek, the gesture startlingly gentle for a man who radiated controlled violence. "Listen very carefully," he whispered, his thumb brushing her temple. "In exactly 2 minutes, you're going to walk to the bathroom. There's a window. Climb out. My car is the black Escalade in the alley behind this building. Get in, lock the doors, wait for me." "What? No, I can't just..." "Catherine," his eyes bored into hers. "Those men came here to take you. I came here to stop them. You have one chance to walk out of this alive." The words hit her like ice water. "Take me? Why?" "Because of who your father was. Because of what he did 23 years ago. Because you're the last piece of unfinished business." Russell's jaw tightened. "And because I made him a promise the night he died that I would never let them have you." Catherine's world tilted. "My father? My father left before I was born," my mom said. "Your mother lied." Russell's voice was flat, absolute. "She lied to protect you. She lied because I told her to. And if you don't move in the next 90 seconds, everything she sacrificed will be for nothing." The gray-suited men were standing now, their coffee cups abandoned. One of them was walking toward the booth. Panic flooded Catherine's veins. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be happening in Melvin's diner on a Tuesday morning while Jimmy hummed off key in the kitchen and the lawyer at table 3 read about sports scores. But the man approaching had his hand inside his jacket now. Russell stepped into his path, blocking Catherine from view. "Excuse me, gentlemen. Can I help you with something?" "Just looking for someone," the man said. His voice was smooth, conversational, wrong for the violence coiling beneath it. "Well, you won't find them here." Russell's tone never changed, but something in his posture did. He expanded somehow, taking up more space, becoming more there. This is a family breakfast. I suggest you keep moving. The two men exchanged glances. The second one spoke into his phone again. Russell didn't look back at Catherine, but his voice cut through the tension like a blade. Move. Now. Catherine's legs finally obeyed. She slid out of the booth, her notepad clattering to the floor. The bathroom was 15 feet away. 15 feet that felt like miles. Behind her, she heard Russell say something else, his voice dropping to a register that promised unspeakable consequences. Catherine ran. The bathroom door slammed behind her. The small window above the toilet beckoned. And in the alley below, a black Escalade waited with its engine running, driven by a ghost from a past she never knew existed. Catherine's hands were still shaking when she climbed through the bathroom window, her uniform shirt catching on the latch. She dropped into the alley with less grace than she'd hoped, stumbling against a dumpster before spotting the black Escalade idling 10 feet away. The windows were tinted dark. For a horrible moment, Catherine wondered if she'd made a catastrophic mistake, if Russell wasn't who he claimed to be, if she was climbing into something worse than what she'd left behind. But the image of those gray-suited men, their hands reaching into their jackets, propelled her forward. She yanked the door open and threw herself inside, immediately hitting the lock button. The leather seats smelled new, expensive. Classical music played softly through the speakers. Nothing about this matched the violence she'd just witnessed. Catherine's breath came in ragged gasps. Through the tinted windows, she could see the diner's back entrance. Any second now, those men would realize she was gone. Any second now. The driver's door opened and Russell slid behind the wheel with practiced efficiency. He didn't speak, didn't look at her, just shifted into gear and pulled out of the alley at a speed that was fast without being reckless. What? Where are we? Stay down. Russell's voice was clipped, professional. His eyes never left the rearview mirror. Catherine wanted to argue, wanted to demand answers, wanted to scream. Instead, she found herself obeying, sliding lower in her seat as the Escalade navigated through side streets she recognized but had never paid attention to before. 2 minutes passed. 3. The classical music continued its peaceful melody, absurdly calm against the storm raging in Catherine's chest. Finally, Russell spoke. You can sit up now. We're clear. Catherine straightened. Her entire body wound tight as a spring. Clear from what? Who were those men? Why did they? Her voice cracked. You said something about my father. You said my mother lied. Russell's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. Not here. Not yet. Not yet? Catherine's fear was rapidly transforming into fury. You just made me climb out a bathroom window. You said those men were going to take me. I think I deserve some answers right now. You deserve the truth. Russell's jaw tightened. But the truth is going to shatter everything you think you know about your life. And I need you somewhere safe before that happens. Safe? I don't even know who you are. Russell pulled the Escalade into a parking garage, winding up 3 levels before finally stopping in a corner spot far from other vehicles. He killed the engine, and the sudden silence felt deafening. When he turned to face her, Catherine saw something in his eyes she hadn't expected. Pain. My name is Russell Chase, he said quietly. I knew your father. We worked together for 15 years. He was my best friend, my brother in every way that mattered. He paused, his voice roughening, and I was there the night he died, 23 years ago, holding his hand while he made me promise to keep you safe no matter what it cost. Catherine's world tilted. That's not my father left before I was born. My mom told me. Your mother told you what I instructed her to tell you. Russell's eyes never wavered. Because the truth would have put a target on your back from the moment you could speak. Because the people your father betrayed don't forgive. They don't forget. And they sure as hell don't let debts go unpaid. Debts? Catherine's voice was barely a whisper. What kind of debts? The kind paid in blood. The words hung between them, heavy and terrible. Catherine's mind raced through memories, her mother's paranoia, the constant moving, the way Linda would freeze whenever a car parked too long outside their building. The pieces were clicking together, forming a picture Catherine didn't want to see. Those men in the diner, she said slowly. They're the ones my father betrayed? They work for them, the Salazar cartel. Russell leaned back, his shoulders carrying the weight of decades. Your father and I ran operations for them once. Moved money, protected shipments, handled problems. But when they asked us to move a different kind of cargo, children, your father said no. Catherine's stomach lurched. Children? He didn't just say no. He stole evidence. Documentation of their trafficking operation, names, routes, everything needed to bring them down. Russell's voice was hollow. He was going to turn it over to the FBI, but they found out before he could. They executed him in a warehouse down by the docks, made it look like a robbery gone wrong. Tears burned Catherine's eyes. And my mother? Was pregnant with you. I got her out that same night. New identity, new city, new life. We've been moving you every few years to stay ahead of their searches. Russell pulled something from his pocket, a burner phone. This is for you. Keep it charged. Keep it with you. When things go bad, you call the only number programmed in there. When things go bad? Catherine's voice rose. When? Russell's expression was grim. Those men saw you today. They know where you work, where you live. He met her eyes. Catherine, I'm sorry, but your quiet life just ended. The cartel has been looking for you for 23 years. He started the engine again. And now they've found you. Catherine stared at the burner phone in her trembling hands. The black plastic felt foreign, dangerous, like holding evidence of a crime she didn't commit. Outside the Escalade's windows, the parking garage's fluorescent lights cast everything in sickly yellow, making the whole conversation feel like a fever dream. I need to go home, she said finally, her voice hollow. I need to talk to my mother. She needs to tell me the truth herself. Russell's expression darkened. Going home is the worst thing you could do right now. I don't care. Catherine's grief was hardening into something sharper. 23 years. 23 years of lies. Of moving every time I made friends. Of her checking locks and looking over her shoulder and making me feel crazy for wanting a normal life. Her voice cracked. She owes me the truth, to my face. Russell was quiet for a long moment, his scarred hands resting on the steering wheel. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of old regrets. Your mother did what I told her to do. Every move, every lie, every terrified moment that was me trying to keep you alive. If you're angry, be angry at me. Oh, I am, Catherine's eyes flashed. But she's the one who looked me in the eye every day and pretended my father was some deadbeat who abandoned us. She let me hate him. She let you hate him because hate is easier than grief. Russell started the engine. But if you're determined to do this, I'm coming with you. Those men know where you work. They'll know where you live within the hour. The drive to Catherine's apartment took 12 minutes. 12 minutes of silence, broken only by the low hum of tires on asphalt and the occasional crackle of a police radio scanner Russell had mounted beneath his dash. Catherine watched the familiar streets pass, seeing them differently now. Every parked car was a potential threat. Every pedestrian could be watching. Her building looked the same as it had this morning, tired brick facade. Overflowing dumpster by the entrance. Mrs. Chen's cat in the third-floor window. But crossing the threshold felt like entering enemy territory. Russell's hand moved to his jacket, resting near his concealed weapon. Which floor? 4th. Apartment 4C. They climbed the stairs in tense silence. Catherine's keys jingled as she unlocked the door, and suddenly she was 8 years old again, coming home from school to find her mother frantically packing boxes, saying they had to leave right now. No time for questions. How many times had they done this? 6 moves before Catherine turned 16. 8 before she turned 20. Mom? Catherine called out, stepping inside. Linda Alvarez appeared in the kitchen doorway, dish towel in hand, her face lighting up then immediately draining of color when she saw Russell behind her daughter. No, the word came out as barely a whisper. No, Russell, you said she was safe. You promised she'd be safe if we followed the rules. The rules just changed. Russell closed the door, locked it, then wedged a chair under the handle. They found her at the diner this morning, 2 of Salazar's men. Linda swayed, gripping the door frame. She looked older suddenly, the lines around her eyes deepening. How? We were so careful. Careful? Catherine's voice was sharp enough to cut. Is that what you call lying to me for my entire life? Her mother flinched as if struck. Catherine, don't. Catherine held up her hand, surprised by how steady it was when everything inside her was shaking apart. Russell told me. About Dad. About what he did. About how he died. The last word broke. You let me think he abandoned us. You let me believe I wasn't wanted. Tears spilled down Linda's face. I let you believe you were safe. That's all I cared about, keeping you safe. By keeping me in the dark? Catherine's anger was a living thing now, hot and righteous. I had a right to know who my father was, what he stood for, that he died trying to save children. He died and left me alone. Linda's voice rose, 23 years of buried grief erupting. He died and left me pregnant and terrified with killers hunting us. Don't you dare stand there and judge the choices I made to keep you breathing. The apartment fell silent except for Linda's ragged breathing. Russell moved to the window, peering through the blinds. This conversation needs to happen, but it needs to happen somewhere else. We've been here too long already. I'm not going anywhere. Catherine's jaw set stubbornly. Not until she tells me everything. No more edited versions. No more protecting me from the truth. Linda and Russell exchanged a look, some wordless communication built on decades of shared burden. Finally, Linda nodded, defeat and resignation in her shoulders. She moved to the kitchen, reached behind the refrigerator, and pulled out a manila envelope that had been taped to the back. Dust coated its surface, suggesting it had been hidden there for years. Your father's name was Thomas Alvarez, Linda said quietly, returning to stand before Catherine. And before he was your father, before he was my husband, he was one of the most effective operators the Salazar cartel had ever employed. She opened the envelope, and photographs spilled onto the coffee table. Catherine's breath caught. The man in the photos looked like her, same eyes, same smile, same slight dimple in his left cheek. He also looked like someone who had seen things that would haunt him forever. This, Linda said, her voice breaking, is who your father really was. Catherine's hands trembled as she picked up the photographs one by one. Her father, Thomas, young and intense, standing beside Russell in what looked like a warehouse. Another photo showed him in an expensive suit, shaking hands with men whose faces had been carefully cut out of the frame. A third captured him looking over his shoulder, fear evident in eyes that matched Catherine's own. He started when he was 19, Linda said, sinking onto the worn couch. Her voice had taken on a distant quality, as if she were reading someone else's story. Poor kid from East Baltimore who wanted to prove he was tough enough, smart enough, valuable enough to matter. The Salazar cartel gave him that, gave him purpose. Russell remained by the window, his silhouette dark against the afternoon light filtering through the blinds. Thomas was brilliant, could memorize routes, organize shipments, handle logistics better than men twice his age. Salazar himself took notice. Within 5 years, your father was untouchable. Until he wasn't, Catherine said quietly, studying a photo of her father laughing at something off camera. He looked so young. Younger than she was now. Linda nodded, wiping her eyes. I met him at a courier drop. I was working low-level transports, didn't ask questions, just delivered packages. He told me later that the moment he saw me, he knew he wanted out. Wanted something better than blood money and looking over his shoulder. But you can't just leave a cartel, Russell interjected, his voice hard. Thomas knew that. We both did. The only way out was prison or death. Those were the options. Catherine set down the photographs, her chest tight. What changed? What made him actually try? The silence that followed was suffocating. Finally, Linda spoke. They asked him to coordinate a shipment from Mexico. Thomas said yes, it was his job. But when the cargo arrived and he saw what was inside, her voice broke. 12 children. The oldest was maybe 10 years old. Drugged, terrified, packed like merchandise. Catherine felt bile rise in her throat. Your father came home that night and threw up for an hour, Linda continued. I'd never seen him like that, broken. He kept saying, I can't, Linda. I can't do this anymore. Those are babies. She looked at Catherine with red-rimmed eyes. 2 weeks later, I told him I was pregnant with you. Russell turned from the window, his expression grim. Thomas made his decision that night. He told me he was going to steal the cartel's trafficking documentation, every route, every client, every person involved from top to bottom. Said he was going to hand it over to the FBI and disappear with Linda before the dust settled. But he trusted someone he shouldn't have. Catherine guessed, the pieces falling into place with horrible clarity. He trusted his handler, a man named Victor Salazar, nephew to the cartel's leader. Russell's jaw clenched. Victor found out about the stolen files 3 days before Thomas planned to run. They took him to a warehouse, tortured him for the location of the evidence. When he wouldn't talk, they executed him. Linda's sob was raw, grief as fresh as if it had happened yesterday. I was 7 months pregnant. Russell showed up at our apartment at 2 a.m, covered in blood. He told me Thomas was gone. Told me I had to leave immediately that night. No questions, no goodbyes. Catherine's vision blurred with tears. The evidence. Did they find it? No. Russell's voice carried a note of grim satisfaction. Thomas died protecting its location, which means the cartel has spent the last 23 years searching for it, and searching for anyone who might know where it is. Me, Catherine whispered. They think I know. They think you might lead them to it eventually. Or they think your mother told you something before she dies. Or, Russell hesitated. They think you are it. Catherine's head snapped up. What? Linda reached across the coffee table, grabbing Catherine's hand with desperate strength. Your middle name, the one I made you hide, the one I told you never to write on official documents, the one I said was bad luck in our family. Soledad, Catherine said slowly. You told me it was my grandmother's name, but that I lied. Linda's grip tightened. Your middle name is the password. Thomas encoded the evidence with it before he died. That's why I could never let you use it. Why I panicked every time a teacher asked for your full legal name. Why we moved every time someone got too curious. The apartment felt too small suddenly, the walls closing in. Catherine pulled her hand away, standing and pacing to the window where Russell still stood watch. So what now? She asked, her voice hollow. They know where I work. They'll figure out where I live. What's the plan? Keep running forever? Change my name again? Pretend to be someone else until they find me anyway? Russell and Linda exchanged another loaded glance. There might be another option, Russell said carefully. The evidence is still out there. Thomas hid it somewhere he thought no one would look. If we could find it, we could finish what my father started. Catherine finished, something hard and fierce blooming in her chest. We could bring them down. Catherine, no, Linda started. But Russell was nodding slowly, something like respect dawning in his weathered features. We could, he agreed. But it would mean walking directly into the fire your father died trying to shield you from. Catherine met his gaze steadily, her father's eyes staring back from her own face. Then let's burn it all down. The words hung in the air like a declaration of war. Linda's face went pale, but Russell's expression shifted, calculating, reassessing the young woman standing before him with steel in her voice. You don't know what you're saying, Linda whispered. Catherine, these people, they don't just kill. They make examples. They make you wish you were dead first. They already made an example. Catherine's voice was steady now, anchored by something deeper than fear. They made one out of my father. Out of us. We've been running my entire life, Mom. When does it stop? Russell crossed his arms, studying her with the intensity of someone evaluating a soldier for combat. It stops when they're in prison or in the ground. Those are the only two options with the Salazar cartel. Then we put them there. Catherine turned to face him fully. You said my father hid evidence that could bring them down. Where? Where would he have put it? If I knew that, I would have used it 23 years ago. Russell's frustration bled through his controlled exterior. Thomas told me he'd hidden it somewhere. She'd never think to look. I assumed he meant Linda, but he died before he could say more. Linda stood abruptly, moving to the kitchen window. Her silhouette was rigid against the fading afternoon light. He used to say cryptic things like that, thought he was being clever, protecting me by keeping me ignorant. Her laugh was bitter. Instead, he just left us with riddles and corpses. Catherine flinched at the venom in her mother's voice, but she understood it. Grief and anger were two sides of the same coin she was feeling both now, a molten mixture burning through her chest. What else did he say? Catherine pressed. In those last days before he died, did he mention anything unusual? Any place that was important to him? Linda shook her head, but Russell went still. What? Catherine demanded. What are you remembering? The night before he died, Thomas asked me to promise him something. Russell's voice was distant, reaching back through decades. He said, if anything happens to me, make sure my daughter knows I loved her. Make sure she knows her name means something. At the time, I thought he was being sentimental. But maybe, her name, Linda breathed, turning from the window. He was obsessed with her name. We fought about it for weeks. I wanted something simple. American. He insisted on Catherine. Soledad Alvarez said it had to be exactly that, in that order. Catherine felt electricity run down her spine. Soledad is the password. But what's it unlocking? What's the rest of the code? Before anyone could answer, Russell's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, and his entire body tensed. We need to leave. Now. What? 2 SUVs just pulled up outside, black Escalades, tinted windows. He was already moving, pulling his weapon and checking the chamber. They're not trying to hide anymore. Linda's composure shattered. Oh God, they're here. Mom, breathe. Catherine grabbed her mother's shoulders, surprised by her own calm. Russell, how many? At least 6 that I can see. Probably more. He moved to the door, peering through the peephole. They're covering the exits. We're boxed in. Catherine's mind raced. 4th floor, no fire escape. Windows that led to a 4-story drop onto concrete. Every tactical disadvantage, but also a home they'd lived in for 3 years. A space Catherine knew intimately. The roof. she said suddenly. There's access through Mrs. Chen's apartment in 4F. She leaves her door unlocked during the day because she's deaf and afraid she won't hear the paramedics if she has another heart attack. Russell stared at her. That's actually brilliant. Linda? But Linda was frozen, her breathing rapid and shallow. The sounds from the stairwell were growing louder, heavy boots, multiple sets, moving with military precision. Mom. Catherine grabbed her mother's face, forcing eye contact. I need you with me. Dad protected us for as long as he could. Now it's our turn. Can you run? Something shifted in Linda's eyes. The fear didn't disappear, but it was joined by something fiercer maternal instinct, the same force that had kept them alive for 23 years. I can run, she said. Russell was already at the door. On my signal. Straight to 4F. No hesitation. No looking back. I'll cover the hallway. Catherine's heart hammered against her ribs. This was insane. This was suicide. This was... The door to the stairwell burst open. Voices shouted in Spanish. Now! Russell yanked open their apartment door. They ran. The hallway stretched impossibly long. Catherine's sneakers squeaked on the linoleum. Behind her, her mother's labored breathing. Ahead, Mrs. Chen's door, with its faded welcome mat and jade plant. Gunfire erupted. Catherine didn't think, just grabbed her mother and dove through Mrs. Chen's unlocked door as bullets punched holes in the wall where her head had been seconds before. Russell followed, slamming the door and shooting out the lock to buy them seconds. Mrs. Chen sat in her recliner, oblivious, with her TV volume on maximum, a game show blaring. Roof access where? Russell barked. Catherine pointed to the utility closet. Inside, a ladder led up to a hatch. More gunfire. The door wouldn't hold. Russell went first, then helped Linda up. Catherine was halfway up the ladder when she heard it, her mother's voice, cracking with emotion she'd suppressed for decades. He would be so proud of you, baby. Your father would be so proud. Catherine climbed into darkness, the words burning in her chest like a promise. Or a prayer. The rooftop air hit Catherine's lungs like ice. Night had fallen while they'd been trapped inside, the city lights sprawling below them in a grid of false safety. Russell was already moving, scanning the neighboring rooftops with tactical efficiency. There, he pointed to a fire escape 2 buildings over. We jump to that roof, take the fire escape down, steal a car from the street. 5 minutes and we're gone. Linda stared at the gap between buildings, maybe 6 feet of empty air and 40 feet of fatal drop. I can't. Russell, I can't. You can and you will. His voice was iron. Because those men aren't coming up here to talk. The rooftop access door shuttered behind them. Heavy impact, someone ramming it with their shoulder. Catherine grabbed her mother's hand. Together, on 3, they ran and jumped. For one terrible moment, Catherine was airborne, suspended above the street where death waited. Then her feet hit tar paper and gravel, her momentum carrying her forward into a roll that left her palms scraped and bleeding. Linda landed hard, crying out as her ankle twisted. Russell caught her before she fell, then was already moving toward the fire escape. Go, go, go! They clattered down the metal stairs, the sound impossibly loud in the quiet neighborhood. Below, a gray sedan sat at the curb, some businessman's midlife crisis with leather seats and a navigation system. Russell had it hot-wired in 40 seconds. They peeled away from the curb just as the cartel's men rounded the corner, weapons raised. Bullets sparked off the trunk. The rear windshield exploded in a shower of glass. Catherine pressed herself flat across the back seat, covering her mother's body with her own as Russell drove like physics was optional. They screamed through red lights, wrong way down one-way streets, until finally the gunfire faded behind them. Everyone alive? Russell's voice was steady despite the chaos. Alive, Catherine managed, sitting up. Her mother was crying silently, her ankle already swelling purple. Russell's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his expression darkening. It's a message, from someone using your father's old contact protocol. What does it say? Catherine demanded. You want the evidence? Come to Pier 47. Midnight. Come alone or the girl dies screaming like her father did. Russell's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. It's a trap. Obviously, Catherine said. But it's also bait we can't ignore. Someone out there knows about the evidence. Maybe someone who knew my father. Or someone who killed your father and wants to finish the job. Russell pulled into an abandoned lot, killing the engine. Catherine, you can't seriously be considering. I'm not considering. I'm going. Her voice was steel. This is the first real lead we've had. Someone reached out specifically. Someone who knows the protocol. That means something. Linda grabbed her daughter's arm, her grip desperate. Baby, please. We can run. We can disappear. Russell knows people. Safe houses. And run forever? Catherine pulled free, gentler than her words. Mom, I'm 23 years old. When do I get to stop being afraid? When do I get to actually live? The question hung in the stolen car, unanswerable. Russell checked his watch. It's 10:30 now. Pier 47 is 20 minutes south. If we're doing this, and I can't believe I'm saying this, we need a plan better than walking into an ambush. So we don't walk in. We scout first. High ground, surveillance, backup escape routes. Catherine spoke with a confidence she didn't feel but needed to project. You taught me that last year when you were coincidentally at the same shooting range as me 3 weeks in a row. Russell's eyebrow raised. You knew about that? I've known someone was watching me since I was 16. I just didn't know it was you. Catherine met his gaze. Teach me. Right now. Whatever I need to know to survive the next 90 minutes. What followed was the most intense crash course of Catherine's life. Russell pulled weapons from hidden compartments in the stolen sedan, a spare pistol, magazines, a knife. He showed her proper grip, sight alignment, trigger discipline, made her practice reloading until her hands moved without thinking. You aim for center mass. Not the head, not the legs. Center mass. Biggest target, hardest to miss. His voice was clinical, detached. You fire until the threat stops moving. No warning shots, no hesitation. Someone comes at you with intent to harm. You put them down. Catherine's hands trembled around the unfamiliar weight of the Glock. I don't know if I can. You can't know until the moment arrives. Russell's expression softened fractionally. Your father was the same way. Gentle man with a poet's soul. But when people he loved were threatened, he became something else entirely. He placed his hand over hers on the weapon. That capacity is in you too, Catherine. I see it. The question is whether you'll access it in time. Midnight approached like an execution date. They drove to the marina in tense silence, Linda clutching a rosary Catherine didn't know she owned. The piers stretched into darkness, water lapping against concrete pylons. Pier 47 was the furthest one out, isolated, perfect for an ambush. Russell parked 3 blocks away. I go in first. You stay with your mother. If anything goes wrong. If anything goes wrong, we're all dead anyway. Catherine checked her weapon one last time. So let's make sure nothing goes wrong. They moved through shadows toward the pier, where someone enemy or ally waited with answers written in blood. The pier stretched into darkness like a gangplank. Catherine crouched behind a shipping container, her borrowed Glock heavy in her grip, watching Russell move through shadows with the fluid grace of someone who'd done this 1,000 times before. Pier 47 was quiet. Too quiet. No cars, no figures waiting, just the rhythmic slap of water against wood and the distant cry of a gull. Russell signaled all clear, but his body language screamed caution. He approached the end of the pier where a single folding chair sat in a pool of lamplight, something rectangular resting on its seat. An envelope. Catherine's instincts screamed trap, but Russell was already reaching for it, his weapon trained on the surrounding darkness. He tore it open, his face illuminated by the lamplight as he read. Then he went completely still. Russell? Catherine whispered into the cheap burner phone he'd given her. What does it say? His voice came back hollow, stunned. It's from Thomas, your father, written the day before he died. The world tilted. Catherine stood without thinking, abandoning her cover position. Her mother's sharp intake of breath behind her went ignored. She crossed the pier in a run, her footsteps echoing off the water. Russell handed her the letter wordlessly, his expression unreadable. The paper was yellowed with age, the handwriting slightly smudged but still legible. Russell, if you're reading this, I'm already gone. I'm sorry, brother. Sorry for the burden I'm about to place on you. Sorry for the life you'll have to live in the shadows, protecting my family instead of building your own. The evidence is hidden where Linda first told me she was pregnant. The bench overlooking the harbor where I promised her we'd build something clean, something good. Underneath the 3rd plank from the left. The password is our daughter's full name, every letter counts. Catherine Soledad Alvarez. Tell her it means pure solace in the language of our people. Tell her she was my redemption. The Salazars will never stop hunting, but if the evidence reaches the right hands, my family might finally be free. That's all I ever wanted, for them to be free. Protect them, Russell. Protect her. Your brother until death and beyond. Thomas. Catherine's vision blurred. Her hands shook so badly Russell had to steady the paper. Behind her, Linda's footsteps approached uneven because of her injured ankle. but determined. "Let me see it," Linda whispered. Catherine handed her mother the letter and watched 23 years of carefully constructed walls crumble. Linda read it once, twice, then pressed the paper to her chest like she could absorb her dead husband's words through her skin. "The bench," Linda choked out. "Harbor Park, near the lighthouse. We used to go there every Sunday morning before—" Her voice broke. "Before everything went to hell." Russell was already moving, scanning the darkness with renewed urgency. "This letter didn't appear here by accident. Someone wanted us to find it. Someone who knew where Thomas hid it all these years. Or someone who wants us to lead them straight to it," Catherine said, her tactical training kicking in despite the emotional maelstrom. "This could still be bait." "It's bait," Russell agreed. "But it's also the only real lead we've got." They returned to the stolen sedan in tense silence, hyper-aware of every shadow, every distant car engine. Linda clutched the letter like a lifeline, tears streaming down her face unchecked. Once they were moving, Catherine finally asked the question burning in her chest. "Mom, the bench where you told Dad about me. Tell me about that day." Linda was quiet for so long Catherine thought she wouldn't answer. Then, softly, "It was March, early morning, cold enough to see your breath. Thomas had been distant for weeks. I thought he was pulling away from me, planning to go back to his wife." She laughed bitterly. "He didn't have a wife, but I didn't know that then. Didn't know most of what he really was." "What happened when you told him?" Catherine pressed, needing to hear it, needing to know she'd been wanted. "He cried." Linda's voice was tender with memory. "This hard man who'd seen God knows what violence, he put his head in his hands and cried. Then he looked at me with your eyes, Catherine, your exact eyes, and said, 'This is my chance to do something right.'" She wiped her face. 3 weeks later he was dead. The car fell silent except for the hum of tires on asphalt. Russell navigated through back streets toward Harbor Park, his expression grim. "The Salazars will have people watching that park. If that letter found its way to the pier, they know what it says. They'll be waiting." "Good," Catherine said, surprising herself with the coldness in her voice. "Let them wait. I'm tired of running from ghosts." They parked 6 blocks away as dawn began threatening the eastern horizon. Harbor Park was a small green space overlooking the water, dotted with benches and walking paths. During the day, it would be filled with joggers and families. Now, in the pre-dawn darkness, it belonged to the dangerous. Russell handed Catherine an extra magazine. "Stay behind me, if shooting starts." "I know what to do," Catherine interrupted, checking her weapon with movements that were becoming familiar. "You taught me." Linda grabbed both their hands, her grip fierce despite her tears. "Your father loved you before you were even born, baby. Whatever happens today, never forget that. Never forget you were his redemption." Catherine squeezed back, then released her mother's hand. They moved toward the benches, where a dead man had hidden the truth 23 years ago, and where that truth was about to resurface, bloody, violent, and undeniable. The bench sat exactly where Linda remembered, weathered wood overlooking black water, the lighthouse beam sweeping across the harbor in lazy rotations. In the growing dawn light, Catherine could see why her father had chosen this spot. It was beautiful, peaceful, the kind of place where you might believe in second chances. Russell approached first, weapon drawn, scanning the tree line. Catherine followed 3 paces behind, her heart hammering but her hands steady. Linda waited by a nearby oak, her injured ankle making her a liability in a firefight. "Third plank from the left," Russell murmured, kneeling beside the bench. He pulled a multi-tool from his jacket and began working the plank loose. The wood was swollen from years of weather, resistant. Catherine kept watch, her eyes tracking every shadow. The park was too quiet. No birds singing, no distant traffic sounds, just the rhythmic crash of waves and Russell's careful prying. The plank came free with a groan of aged wood. Underneath, wrapped in layers of plastic and duct tape, was a metal document box. Russell lifted it reverently, like handling a holy relic. "Catherine." The password. She knelt beside him, her fingers trembling as she entered the combination lock. CATHERENESOLEDADALVAREZ. 23 letters, 23 years. The lock clicked open. Inside were photographs, ledgers, shipping manifests, and a USB drive labeled in her father's handwriting. "For the FBI, for my daughter, for redemption." Catherine's breath caught. This was it. The evidence that had cost her father his life. The truth that could bring down an empire built on suffering. Russell was already photographing pages with his phone. backing up the evidence in case they didn't survive the next hour. We need to move. Now. Get this too. The first gunshot shattered the morning silence. Russell went down hard, blood blooming across his shoulder. Catherine screamed, instinct taking over as she returned fire toward the tree line. 3 figures emerged from the shadows. No, 5, no, 8. They'd been surrounded the entire time. "Run!" Russell gasped, shoving the metal box toward Catherine. "Get your mother and run!" But Linda was already running toward them, her injured ankle forgotten, maternal instinct overriding self-preservation. "Catherine, behind you." Catherine spun. A man in a gray suit had circled around, his weapon trained on her center mass. Time slowed. She could see his finger tightening on the trigger, see the cold calculation in his eyes. She fired first. The recoil kicked through her arms. The man fell backward, clutching his chest, surprise frozen on his face. Catherine stared at what she'd done, horror and necessity warring in her gut. "Catherine, move!" Russell was up, his left arm hanging useless, but his right hand steady on his weapon. He provided covering fire as Catherine grabbed the evidence box and ran toward her mother. They made it 10 feet before the SUVs appeared, blocking every exit. Black Escalades with tinted windows, boxing them in against the water. The back door of the center vehicle opened. The man who stepped out wore an expensive suit and an expression of weary disappointment. He was older than Catherine expected, maybe 60, with silver hair and the bearing of someone accustomed to absolute authority. Victor Salazar, the nephew who'd betrayed her father. "Catherine Alvarez," he said, his voice cultured, almost gentle. "You look so much like Thomas, it's startling. Same eyes, same stubborn jaw." He gestured at his men, who lowered their weapons slightly. "Please, let's not waste more lives today. Give me the box and walk away. You have my word, you'll be unharmed." "Your word?" Catherine's voice was raw with rage. "You tortured my father to death." "I did what the family required." Victor's expression remained calm. Thomas knew the rules. He broke them. Actions have consequences. He took a step closer. "But you, Catherine, you're innocent in this. Your mother is innocent. Even Russell, misguided though he is, only did what he thought was right. Give me the evidence. End this. Live your life." Catherine's grip tightened on the box. Behind her, Russell was bleeding heavily, his breathing labored. Her mother stood frozen, terror and defiance mixing in her eyes. "My father died for this," Catherine said quietly. "Died so children wouldn't be sold like merchandise. You think I'm going to hand that sacrifice back to the people who killed him?" Victor's friendly mask slipped, revealing something cold underneath. "I think you're going to be practical. Look around, Catherine. You're outnumbered, outgunned, and cornered against the water. The only question is whether you die here with that box or live without it. Choose." Catherine looked at the men surrounding them, looked at Russell barely standing, at her mother's terrified face, looked at the water behind them, dark and deep and offering no escape. Then she looked at the metal box containing her father's redemption. "Russell," she said calmly, "can you swim with one arm?" He caught on immediately, a fierce grin splitting his bloodied face. "Better than I can with 2. "Catherine, no." Linda grabbed her daughter's arm. "The water's freezing, the current. Is better odds than staying here." Catherine shoved the box into her jacket, zipping it tight. "Mom, do you trust me?" Linda's face crumpled, years of fear and love and desperate hope written in every line. "With my life, baby. Always." "Then jump." They ran for the edge of the pier as Victor screamed orders. Gunfire erupted. Catherine felt something hot graze her thigh but didn't stop, didn't think, just grabbed her mother's hand and leaped. The water hit like a wall of ice, driving the air from her lungs. The weight of the metal box tried to drag her down. Above, flashlight beams cut through the darkness, voices shouting in Spanish. Russell surfaced beside her, his face gray with pain. "Harbor Patrol dock, quarter-mile south. Swim underwater as much as you can." They dove. Catherine's lungs burned. Her clothes weighed her down. The cold was shocking, numbing, turning her limbs clumsy and slow. Beside her, she could feel her mother struggling, could hear Russell's labored breathing when they surfaced for air. But they swam, past the pier, past the watching men, into the darkness where the lighthouse beam couldn't reach. When they finally dragged themselves onto the Harbor Patrol dock, Catherine's entire body was shaking uncontrollably. The metal box was still zipped inside her jacket, its weight reassuring against her chest. Russell collapsed on the wooden planks, his blood mixing with seawater. That was the stupidest, Bravest thing I've ever seen anyone do. Learned from the best, Catherine gasped, helping her mother up. Linda was crying and laughing simultaneously, clutching her daughter with desperate strength. Your father would have done exactly the same thing. Exactly. That same thing. In the distance, they could hear sirens. Someone had reported the gunfire. Police were coming. Catherine pulled out the metal box, its plastic wrapping miraculously still intact. Inside was the evidence that had cost her father everything. We finish this, she said, her voice steady despite her shaking hands. We take this to the FBI. We bring them down. We make Dad's death mean something. Russell nodded, using his good arm to pull out his phone. I know someone. Federal prosecutor. Ows me for something I did in '09. She'll listen. As the sun rose over Baltimore Harbor, painting the water gold, Catherine Alvarez stood dripping and bloodied and alive, holding her father's legacy in her frozen hands. The war wasn't over. But for the first time in 23 years, they had a weapon that could actually win it. The safe house was actually a boat, a 40-foot fishing vessel named Second Chance that Russell kept docked under a false registration. They huddled in its small cabin while Russell's contact, federal prosecutor Amanda Chen, made her way through morning traffic. Linda had wrapped Russell's shoulder with strips torn from a blanket, her hands steady despite everything. Years of running had taught her emergency medicine. Catherine sat across from them, the metal box open on her lap, photographing every document with Russell's waterproof phone. The evidence was devastating. Shipping routes through 12 countries, financial records showing millions laundered through legitimate businesses, names of politicians, judges, police officers on the cartel's payroll, and dozens of photographs of children being loaded into trucks, their faces blurred but their terror unmistakable. This could bring down half the criminal infrastructure on the East Coast, Catherine whispered, scrolling through the images. Why didn't Dad just turn this in immediately? Why hide it? Because he was waiting for me to get Linda out first, Russell said quietly, his face pale from blood loss. We had a plan. I was supposed to take Linda to a safe house in Canada, get her across the border before Thomas went to the FBI. But Victor figured it out 3 days too soon. Linda's hands stilled on the bandage. You never told me that. All these years you never told me Thomas died buying time for us to escape. What good would it have done? Russell's voice was hollow. He was already gone. Telling you the details wouldn't bring him back. A knock on the boat's hull made everyone freeze. Catherine's hand moved to her weapon, still damp, possibly unreliable, but better than nothing. Russell? It's Amanda. I'm alone. Russell nodded, and Catherine carefully opened the cabin door. Amanda Chen was a compact woman in her 40s, wearing a government-issue blazer and an expression that had seen too many horrors to be surprised by new ones. She took in the scene, the blood, the exhausted faces, the evidence scattered across the table with clinical assessment. You're Russell's ghost, she said to Catherine. The one he's been protecting all these years. Thomas Alvarez's daughter. Catherine. She stepped aside, letting Amanda into the cramped cabin. And this is enough evidence to topple an empire, yes. Amanda was already examining the documents, her sharp eyes moving rapidly. This is extraordinary, Catherine. Chain of custody will be a nightmare, but the sheer volume, the detail. She looked up, her expression grave. You understand what happens when you turn this in. The Salazars don't forgive. Even from prison, Victor will have reach. I'm done running, Catherine said simply. My whole life has been controlled by what they did to my father. No more. Amanda studied her for a long moment, then nodded. All right, here's how this works. I take the evidence into federal custody today. We get protection details on all 3 of you immediately, though, Russell. You'll probably refuse yours. Damn right, he muttered. I'll need your full statements, Catherine and Linda. Everything you know about Thomas's operations, his murder, the attempts on your lives. Amanda pulled out a recorder. This will take hours, and it will be painful. You'll have to relive every moment. Linda reached over and squeezed Catherine's hand. We've lived it every day for 23 years. At least now it'll serve a purpose. What followed was the most emotionally exhausting experience of Catherine's life. She recounted the diner, the whisper, the apartment siege, the marina ambush. Linda spoke about Thomas for the first time without the buffer of lies, his tenderness, his guilt, his desperate hope that his daughter might have a better life than he'd given her. Russell filled in the operational details, names and dates and locations. 23 years of shadow work finally brought into the light. By the time Amanda's recorder clicked off, the sun was setting again. An entire day compressed into testimony that would become evidence in what Amanda promised would be the largest organized crime prosecution in state history. "The FBI will execute raids at dawn," Amanda said, packing the documents carefully. "Victor Salazar, his lieutenants, every address on these lists. We'll coordinate with DEA, ICE, Homeland Security. It's going to be massive." She looked at Catherine directly. "You did this. Your father started it, but you finished it. You should be proud." Catherine didn't feel proud. She felt hollowed out, exhausted, and strangely numb. After Amanda left with 2 armed marshals escorting her, the boat fell silent. Linda was asleep, finally, her body giving in to days of adrenaline crash. Russell sat cleaning his weapon one-handed, a ritual Catherine recognized now as meditation. "What happens after?" Catherine asked quietly. "After the trials, after they're convicted. What do we do then?" Russell was quiet for a long time. "We learn to live without looking over our shoulders. We figure out who we are when we're not just surviving." He glanced at her, something almost like a smile on his weathered face. "You go to college. Maybe. Actually use that scholarship you turned down. Become whoever Catherine Alvarez was supposed to be before the cartel stole that choice. And you?" "Me?" Russell's smile was sad. "I keep the promise I made to your father. I make sure you're safe, you're happy, you're free. That's all I've ever wanted." Catherine moved to sit beside him, this dangerous man who'd been her silent guardian for 23 years. "Russell, thank you for everything, for keeping his promise even when it cost you your own life." He didn't respond with words, just reached over with his good arm and pulled her into an awkward, one-armed hug that felt like the first honest embrace she'd received from a father figure in her entire life. Outside, the harbor water lapped against the boat's hull. Tomorrow, the FBI would strike. Tomorrow, the war would enter its final phase. But tonight, Catherine Alvarez allowed herself to simply be a daughter grieving the father she never knew, grateful for the guardian who'd taken his place, and finally believing she might actually survive to see what peace looked like. The raids happened at 5:47 a.m. on a Tuesday that would later be called the Tuesday Takedown in news reports. Catherine watched from a federal safe house, as news helicopters broadcast live footage, FBI agents in tactical gear flooding a warehouse in East Baltimore, the same warehouse where her father had died 23 years earlier. Victor Salazar was arrested in his waterfront home, still in his silk pajamas, his expression one of genuine shock. The cartel lieutenant who'd led the apartment assault was pulled from a barber's chair mid-shave. One by one, the names from her father's evidence list were taken into custody. 47 arrests in a single morning. Linda stood beside Catherine, gripping her daughter's hand so tightly it hurt. On TV, a reporter was breathlessly describing the largest coordinated strike against organized crime in Maryland history, showing footage of seized vehicles, weapons, cash, and children. 12 children recovered from a transport warehouse, ranging in age from 6 to 14. Catherine's vision blurred. Those children alive, safe, freed because her father had refused to look away, because he'd chosen to die, rather than let the cartel's evil continue unchallenged. "He saved them," Linda whispered, tears streaming freely. "Tommy saved them." Russell appeared in the doorway, his shoulder professionally bandaged now, his arm in a sling. "Amanda just called. Victor's already trying to make a deal. They're offering him witness protection in exchange for testimony against the Mexican operations." "Will they take it?" Catherine asked. "Hell no. Amanda wants maximum sentences across the board. She's got everything she needs from your father's evidence. Victor's just trying to save his own skin." Russell's expression was satisfied, predatory. "He's going to die in prison. They all are." The trials stretched across 6 months. Catherine testified 3 times, each appearance requiring federal marshals and bulletproof vests and routes that changed daily. She described the diner, the whisper, the men who'd hunted her. She identified faces in photographs, confirmed details from her father's documentation, and stood firm under cross-examination that tried to paint her as unreliable, traumatized, confused. She was all those things. But she was also Thomas Alvarez's daughter, and she'd inherited his backbone along with his eyes. Victor Salazar received 4 consecutive life sentences without possibility of parole. His lieutenants received between 15 and 40 years each. The trials uncovered 3 additional trafficking networks, leading to more arrests, more prosecutions, more children saved. Catherine's father's evidence became the foundation for a federal task force dedicated to dismantling human trafficking operations nationwide. On a cool morning in October, exactly 1 year after the whisper that changed everything, Catherine stood at Harbor Park. The bench had been replaced with a memorial plaque that read, "In memory of Thomas Alvarez, who chose courage over comfort and justice over survival. May we all be so brave." Beneath it, someone had left fresh flowers. Linda stood beside her daughter, older somehow, but lighter. The constant fear that had aged her prematurely was finally gone. She'd started therapy, started painting again, started rebuilding the life she'd abandoned 23 years ago. Russell stood slightly apart, giving them space but remaining close enough to protect, still keeping his promise, even though the threat was finally gone. "I got accepted," Catherine said quietly, "to the University of Maryland, Criminal Justice Program. They're letting me start in January." Linda's smile was radiant with pride and relief. "Tommy would be so proud." "He'd be terrified," Catherine corrected with a small laugh. "His daughter studying to become a federal prosecutor? After everything he did to keep me away from this world?" "He'd be proud," Russell said firmly, moving to join them at the memorial. "Because you're not running from it. You're facing it head on, trying to make it better." That's exactly what he did. Catherine traced the letters of her father's name. This man she'd never met but who'd shaped every moment of her existence. "I wish I'd known him, even just once. Even just long enough to say thank you." "He knew," Linda said softly, pulling her daughter close. "Somehow, baby, I think he always knew. The moment I told him I was pregnant, sitting right here on this bench, he knew you'd be extraordinary." They stood in silence, 3 survivors of a war they'd never asked to fight, watching the sun rise over Baltimore Harbor. Catherine's phone buzzed. A text from Amanda. "New trafficking case. Could use your insight when you're ready. No pressure." Catherine smiled, typing back, "I'm ready." She pocketed the phone and took one last look at her father's memorial. 23 years she'd been running from a legacy she didn't understand. Now she was running toward it, but on her own terms, in her own way. "Come on," she said to her mother and Russell. "I'm buying breakfast. Somewhere that's not Melvin's diner." They walked together toward the parking lot, 3 people who'd been broken by the same tragedy and somehow made themselves whole again through sheer stubborn survival. Behind them, the memorial plaque gleamed in the morning light, and if you believed in such things, you might say Thomas Alvarez was finally at peace. His daughter was safe. His evidence had saved lives. His sacrifice had meant something. And in the end, Catherine thought as she climbed into Russell's new car, this one legally purchased, that was all any parent could hope for, that their children would inherit not just their struggles, but their strength to overcome them. She had inherited both, and she would use them to build something her father had dreamed of but never lived to see. A world a little less dark, a little more just. A world where children like those 12 freed from the warehouse could grow up without fear. Catherine Alvarez drove into the daylight, no longer running from her past but carrying it forward, transformed from weight into wings. Thanks for sticking with this story till the end. If you enjoyed it, you're going to love the next one. It's packed with unexpected turns and heartfelt moments. Click the image on your screen to keep the journey going, and make sure to hit subscribe for more amazing stories. Drop a comment and rate this story from 1 to 10. I can't wait to see what you think.